Capcom and Konami seemed to be unspoken rivals by the early 90s, where both companies had competing products out on the market and were borrowing ideas from each other left and right. That is no different when it comes to Bucky O'Hare on the NES, a game by Konami that borrows a lot of ideas from Capcom and other companies and packages it together in one impressive but frustrating game on the 8-bit system.
Bucky O'Hare is a grueling hard, late NES game developed and published by Konami in January of 1992. But maybe you know Bucky and his crew from the 80s comic book or the very short-lived 90s cartoon.
Captain Bucky O'Hare, mutants and aliens and toads beware!
All of them follow the crew of the Righteous Indignation as they fight the evil Toad Empire. It was a very interesting story that luckily got to share in some of the limelight of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but even though it was created before TMNT got any real legs, it is often brushed off as another wannabe like Battletoads, Biker Mice from Mars, or Cowboys of Moo Mesa. The NES game doesn't help anyone feel like Bucky and his crew aren't just ripping off the flavor of the month either. The game obviously takes a lot of inspiration from Mega Man and Battletoads, and I'm sure during development, Konami saw an opportunity to make their own Mega Man style game with an already established license. The game starts with the option of 4 worlds to play through, each with a different environmental theme, and each end with a boss that you fight on a single room style screen. All that's missing is a vertical life bar on each side. Topped it off with Bucky using a Buster style gun, firing little pellets across the screen, and each planet unlocking a crew member who has a new ability. The resemblance is obviously more than a coincidence. Of course, it isn't to say that this is all one big knockoff. Even though there will be some obvious parallels as we go through this, Bucky O'Hare on the NES is a solid, though frustrating game, and is based on the franchise it says it is. While out exploring space in a smaller ship and trying to return to the Righteous Indignation, the crew is attacked by the Toad Empire. Everyone except Bucky is captured and held captive on each of the 4 planets. So of course our hero sets out to rescue his friends, and then once again strike a blow to the Toad Empire. As I said, you can play the levels in any order, but the size of the planets is obviously leading us in a certain order, and you do want to start on the green planet when you're only Bucky, as it doesn't have any obstacles Bucky can't deal with, but still offers a good variety so you can get used to the game's mechanics. Bucky fights with his blaster, which offers a simple and fast shot, and weirdly, he's the only one who can shoot up or down. Holding down on the fire button charges up Bucky's special ability, a high jump. Being that he's a bunny, this shouldn't be shocking, and it can help get to a few better routes and power-ups, but since it takes time to charge, it isn't useful most of the time. Next, it would make sense that the game is leading you towards the red planet, but with blinking unlocked at the end of the green planet, it actually makes more sense to go down to the blue planet and make actual use of the character you've unlocked. You're probably thinking, well duh Kevin, that's how Mega Man works. You need to make the right decision for the order of the bosses, so that makes sense here. But honestly, with the 4 planets, that is really the only decision that makes any noticeable difference in the way you play, so it's just kind of weird. Each planet has a theme, of course, not just a vivid color. It almost seemed to follow a similar pattern. First, an introductory section that has a general presentation of the enemies and some of the challenges we'll see. Then the level ramps up with a series of traps and platforming challenges. It is usually in the second half of the level where things speed into Frustration Town. So even before this video, if you had heard of this game, you had probably heard that it's hard. And honestly, watching footage doesn't really do it justice. Nothing about Bucky O'Hare looks crazy difficult right out of the gate, and I'd say the same goes for something like Battletoads as well. The platforming controls pretty well, but it also has a looseness or inaccuracy that is almost difficult to describe. You never quite feel like you're going to make the jump the way you want to, and when you do, a lot of platforms are arranged in just a way that has you fall to your doom. Seems like there's plenty of space to jump down and take another path, but oh well, no, guess not. This keeps you constantly guessing if you can stick the landing, and that unsureness does not help in any situation. Hesitation can be the end of you in Bucky O'Hare. Getting hit during a jump also kills any momentum you have. You'll see during this section I take a hit from these Toad ships rather than jump through here like it's no big deal, because one hit while jumping over a pit and Bucky will stop in mid-air and drop like a stone. There are also a lot of obstacles that kill you in one hit, and the game has weird hitboxes that can make for a bad time. It is pretty easy to get slightly too close to a boss or something pointy and to just drop dead. This is especially challenging and frustrating when it comes to bosses and larger Crusher-style obstacles. You are not only worried about your own health bar, but also if the game will suddenly decide you're standing too close to something that gets to kill you by slightly grazing you. A great example of this is the Blue Planet, which is an ice planet, so it already introduces slippery ice, of course, which is everyone's favorite in a platformer. After the initial part of the level, trying to stop slipping and jumping at the right time and shooting a few toads, you get plenty of ways to die in one hit. But Konami decided to borrow another idea here and put their own version of the snake pit from Battletoads. It's not the most difficult section in the game, but this will likely be the first time you'll die several times in a row as you try not to fall into a pit or accidentally touch the face? We'll go with the face of the snakes. They try to slip you up again with this little crusher section, but it isn't that bad. The Red Planet is filled with fire and lava. Shocking, I know. There's lots of death pits here, as touching any of the fire or later spikes by not making a jump correctly will have you die in one hit, of course. Most of them are easily avoidable though. Then you're introduced to this boulder, then big arches of fire before the boulder comes back in this little platforming challenge. The Yellow Planet is oddly kind of basic compared to the others in terms of theme. I guess you could say it's mechanical or just sci-fi in theme, just a barren planet floating in space with some half-finished structures throughout. But the main difference here is there are a lot more of the Toad Empire with some new enemies such as small ships and turrets. The level wouldn't be complete though with two of the more frustrating sections sandwiched in here, with a weird flying asteroid part that has you trying to figure out which direction you need to go and jumping on that correct asteroid without falling to your doom, and this minecart section that has some more of the famous one-hit death spikes. Once you beat the boss in each planet, you rescue a crew member, though they never show that occurring, and unlock them as a playable character. Like other games that use a multiple weapon or multiple character mechanic, you can switch through them on the fly by using the select button. Rarely is there one character that best suits each situation, but when the need does arise, switching through them quickly for the particular weapon or extra ability really becomes pivotal. With the Green Planet, we unlock Blinky, our little robot buddy, and he provides a way to break bricks, and instead of a high jump, he has a rocket pack so you can do more of a hover. His weapon has a weird arc and no reach. It's basically pointless in most situations, unlike everyone else who has a weapon that can be a solid replacement for Bucky's. You unlock Jenny after the Blue Planet. She provides an actual weapon upgrade compared to Bucky with a faster firing laser style shot. Her special power allows for a charge shot that you can sort of control with the D-pad. It isn't super handy most of the time, but there will be a few instances that you will be glad you have it. We get to use Deadeye as a character after the Red Planet. He provides a three-way shot. It can come in handy since Bucky is the only one that can shoot down normally. The problem comes with it being just as weak as Bucky's shot, and that spread is so wide. His special ability is he can cling to walls, and then it's basically pointless until one spot of the entire game. Beating the Yellow Planet unlocks Willy. Sort of. We'll come back to that in a minute. He is the most basic weapon swap for Bucky, offering a regular laser-style blaster that shoots faster and hits harder. His special ability is a charge shot, and it's real useful against a few bosses and during a couple of the level sections. All of the characters can upgrade their special ability meter. Throughout the game, you come across power-ups, and you can switch to whichever character you want to get that upgrade, and that sticks with them throughout the entire game, even after a game over when you decide to continue or use a recent password. It adds a bit of strategy to the game, to be able to decide who has more of their special upgraded. When it comes to bosses, while there are a few towards the very end of the second half of the game, the true bosses, such as you play a level then fight a boss, really only make an appearance on the first 4 planets. Our first boss on the Green Planet throws giant boulders that at first glance you have no way of escaping. A frustrating first boss if you didn't realize you can duck right next to them to avoid the rock instead of just die, and die again until the game over. This boss also can't be shot from the front, so you need to wait for a charge and then get behind them. The boss on the Ice Planet is actually rather simple, and weirdly so. They stay stationary and fire rockets, and then at the end of the cycle, try to freeze the flowing water. You just need to keep jumping and firing. But the boss on the Red Planet is this giant rolling ball that you have to use Bucky's jump to avoid, but kind of need Jenny's weapon to take out quickly. The wish-washy jumping is the only reason this is hard. It's easy to not make it to the top of the ball despite looking like you would have and you're crushed. Probably literally and figuratively. The Yellow Planet boss is surprisingly kind of fun. Just don't touch it. It doesn't need to pin you against the screen edge or actually run you over. Any contact is an instant kill, which if you've been paying attention, isn't uncommon for this game. But this is one of those big tank battles where you have to slowly destroy each gun on it until you can just take out the weak point. It is more fun than most because it does a better job providing at least one place to avoid the worst of the attacks, so you can take this either as slowly or as quickly as you want. So this seems like a compact game with a high challenge at first glance. A classic NES title where most of the length comes from the difficulty curve and not how many levels there are. Well, you'd be wrong, since surprise, there's a back half of this game once you rescue all of your teammates, and it certainly doesn't get any easier. This is why I said you sort of unlock Willy after you beat the Yellow Planet boss, and this would go the same for any character you save for the end, because you and your crew are immediately recaptured. So now we're on the Toad Empire warship, and you need to rescue everyone all over again, but this time starting as both Blinky and Bucky. The second half really starts to ramp up the difficulty. In the first half, it certainly isn't impossible to get better at how the game controls and learn the levels. In the second half, you're really met with lots of traps, tight spaces for one-hit deaths with questionable hitboxes, and platforming puzzles where you wait forever for one block to move to the correct spot. The biggest assistance this game gives to the player is infinite continues. You have 3 lives, but you can always continue where you left off. The first half varies how long a section goes to count as a checkpoint, or as they call it, an act. You can either have one long section or one screen. The second half does the same, but the single screen or puzzle acts become more frequent. You also begin to be thankful for the special meter upgrades that stick through the entire game, and begin to loathe that the life meter upgrades don't. At least the points required to get a 1-up are low. Getting through this dungeon of platforming puzzles and traps leads you to each of the captive crew members. You'll need to fight each one to break whatever mind control they have on your crew members. You can easily cheese these fights in some way as they follow the same pattern back and forth while you fight. Once you rescue all of them, you begin the final stretch of the game and begin fighting your way through the ship to dismantle it bit by bit and fight your way out. Don't expect the game to let up here, and in fact, if you've had fun up until the salvage chute and the rest of the magma tanker, expect some of those good feelings to begin to sour. You'll not only begin to see lots of one-screen death traps, such as all these crushers that finally put Deadeye's wall-clinging ability to good use, but then also large stretches of really tough enemies and platforming puzzles. Get ready to see that game over screen more than ever as you traverse some crushers, some other crushers, a water trap where the lights shut off, these weird spinning rooms, and more snake things for good measure. Thank goodness for infinite continues. Bucky O'Hare has a big problem with enemies respawning once you slightly allow the overscan area to reload. This goes from a quirk to mind-numbingly broken and frustrating in certain spots where enemies are difficult to take down. It's not a huge deal when they took 1 or 2 shots to beat. Big problem when they take several and a second enemy keeps respawning. You'll also start running into enemies that cause more of a hazard than attack normally, such as these weird bugs towards the end of the salvage chute, and these space slugs that stop you from jumping entirely. Once you're through the salvage chute, you'll run through another boss before the center of the magma tanker. This mecha toad is pretty difficult to deal with, and mainly because it likes to make huge leaps off the screen and in no way telegraphs where it might land. But put Jenny's charge shot to good use and you'll eventually win this fight. At the end of the tanker, you'll fight what I imagine is the actual power core of the whole place. This fight is based a lot on luck in my opinion. There's just so much happening here, and even after breaking the rocket launcher, you have to deal with giant laser beams. This is just a sign for what is to come. I probably should have talked about this game as if it had 3 parts, because after the place starts exploding, you have the escape section, which is now a side-scrolling shooter. It isn't short either. This isn't a quick, get through the tunnel and fight the last boss and get out of here sort of thing. This feels like a whole other game. You'll want to shoot every toad and grab every coin here to stack up some extra lives and try to keep a maxed out life meter. This is all pretty basic, other than just don't get stuck as the screen scrolls and be careful with the questionable hitboxes. Spikes are everywhere. After a few sections, you'll come across a mini-boss of sorts where you fight this weird metal toad head attached to 2 legs. But right after that, another big boss shows up as another toad ship arrives. This honestly isn't that complicated. The game just flat out makes it a bad time. You have very little room to navigate when you're being fired upon, and touching the ship at all just has you drop out of the sky. Honestly, if you get a game over here and lose your powered up life meter, just start the whole thing over from the beginning. The bottom section especially just chips away at your health because you can't go anywhere until you manage to break all the guns, mostly from the top, using Blinky. There is just a lot of waiting as the ship moves so you can shoot the pre-selected areas, the guns, and the rocket on the back. This may be my least favorite section of the entire game. It is not only frustrating, but tedious as well. Just waiting for the ship to move so you can shoot the booster a few more times as you begin the cycle over and over again. But we're almost to the home stretch, and we'll have to fight the final boss, the big bad Toad himself, and honestly, it isn't that great. The game immediately gets rid of 1/3 of the screen. That fire is instant death, of course, so you have little room to move. The Toad Marshal throws out bombs as he follows a pattern across the screen. It is cramped, and you will be hit, and thankfully they don't make touching the boss instant death here, because the room is way too small for that nonsense. But really, it takes way too long. The real danger here is just getting your life slowly chipped away as you grow tired of the dance. So yeah, beating this game kind of fizzles at the end, as Bucky and the crew fly away victorious. But honestly, if you get here, you should be excited, because not only did you beat a challenging game, but you didn't just give up. And honestly, this game feels like it's designed, in my opinion, to make you just give up. Even with infinite continues, it doesn't feel like it really wants you to succeed. That being said, Bucky O'Hare is a really great game when it plays fair. I've always enjoyed the core action of the game with the Mega Man style gunning and platforming and multiple characters. Being a late NES game, it's also pretty to look at. By the time it was released, this certainly wasn't going to win any awards, but the graphics are nice and detailed. The character designs especially stand out. They all resemble their comic and cartoon counterparts. And of course, we can't ignore the really great music as well. These are some of my favorite tracks on the NES, honestly. They are just really high energy tracks with some great composition. It is hard to remember that Bucky O'Hare is a licensed game, honestly. The game overall seems more remembered than the comic or cartoon on top of it. That may be because the game has stood the test of time longer, being remembered as a late NES game of quality that's frustratingly difficult. But Konami was good at making quality licensed games, and they were good at making them difficult as well, mostly to fight off that rental market, and Bucky O'Hare is no different.
This one is for collectors only right now. As much as I love the game, I would never suggest anybody should pay $150 for a loose cart when this game has so many flaws and you're unlikely to have a great experience right out of the gate. If you want to try this game, maybe using save states and emulation, and then hunt down a physical copy, I think that would be a great idea. Anyway, that's all for this episode of RetroActive. I'm Bucky O'Hare. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.